Tonight, we open the files on the most feared men who ever lived inside San Quentin State Prison. Men whose crimes shook cities, and whose presence haunted the yard itself. This is not about escape. It's about the darkness that came with them. 1. Carol Chessman, the Red Light Bandit. In the early 1950s, one prisoner turned a death row cell into a pulpit heard around the world. His name was Carol Chessman. Convicted of robbery and assault, sentenced under a law that carried death, he became a writer, a symbol, a controversy that would divide America. From that narrow desk, Chessman wrote book after book, calling out the justice system that condemned him. To guards and inmates, he was different, articulate, defiant, untouchable. For 12 years, he fought his sentence from behind the same bars. In 1960, the battle ended. The gas chamber door closed, and the debate over his guilt only grew louder. Even decades later, his name is spoken like a legend, not for what he did outside prison, but for what he became inside it. 2. George Jackson, the Revolution Inside. George Jackson arrived at San Quentin a teenager. By the time he died there, he was a movement. Locked up for a robbery charge, Jackson's mind sharpened behind bars. He studied politics, wrote essays, and became a voice for prisoners demanding change. To some, he was a hero. To others, a threat to the system itself. On August 21, 1971, an escape attempt turned deadly. Jackson was killed, and the prison erupted. The aftermath reshaped security across California, and the legend of George Jackson became a symbol of resistance that frightened even those who admired it. 3. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. When Richard Ramirez entered San Quentin in the late 1980s, the air changed. Guards called him unpredictable. Inmates called him something worse. Convicted of a series of brutal murders across California, Ramirez carried a reputation that followed him through every gate. He spoke little, smiled often, and seemed to enjoy the fear that name brought him. For years, he lived under 24-hour surveillance, confined to a narrow world of steel and whispers. When he died in 2013 of natural causes, some said relief finally reached the row. But the legend stayed, the story of a man whose crimes echoed long after the lights went out. San Quentin has held thousands. Yet, even among them, these names rise like shadows carved into the concrete. Each one changed the prison, and left behind a warning. In a place built to contain fear, some men became its source. 4. Charles Manson, the master of manipulation. When Charles Manson entered San Quentin in 1971, the prison had seen killers before. But none like him. Small in stature, soft-spoken, yet utterly commanding, Manson turned conversation into control. He didn't need violence to inspire it. He already had followers willing to do that for him. Convicted as the mastermind behind the Tate LaBianca murders, Manson became a symbol of evil in modern America. At San Quentin, he was watched constantly. Even behind bars, guards feared his influence more than his hands. He spent decades moving between solitary and psychiatric observation, never expressing remorse, only conviction in his own twisted beliefs. When he died in 2017, the world remembered him not just as a murderer, but as proof that power can survive even without freedom. 5. Clarence Ray Allen, the Old Man of Death Row. When Clarence Ray Allen entered San Quentin, he was already in his 50s. By the time he faced his sentence, he was 76, blind, frail, and confined to a wheelchair. But his crimes had already marked him as one of California's most dangerous. From his cell, Allen ordered the murders of witnesses who had testified against him, turning prison into a command post for violence. Prosecutors called it murder by proxy. To prison staff, he was a ghost, polite, patient, yet feared for what he could still make happen outside those walls. In 2006, after decades of appeals, Allen's sentence was carried out. He was the oldest man executed in California's modern history, and a reminder that danger doesn't always fade with age. 6. David Carpenter, the Trailside Killer. He was known by a name whispered in fear across Northern California, the Trailside Killer. His real name, David Carpenter. Before San Quentin, Carpenter's crimes had terrorized hikers along the state's trails in the late 1970s and early 80s. When he was finally caught and convicted, the headlines branded him as one of California's most cold-blooded killers. In San Quentin, he lived under maximum security. Inmates avoided him. Guards kept distance. Even in silence, he carried the weight of what he'd done, and the dread of what he represented. Decades later, Carpenter remains on death row, one of its longest-serving inmates. Age has slowed him, but the legacy of fear he left behind still echoes far beyond these walls. 7. Richard Allen Davis, the child killer who changed the law. When Richard Allen Davis was brought to San Quentin in the mid-1990s, even hardened inmates turned away. Davis had been convicted of the 1993 kidnapping and murder of 12-year-old Polly Klaas, a case that shocked the nation. The crime's horror wasn't just in what he did, it was what came after. His actions led directly to California's 3 strikes law, one of the toughest sentencing laws in the country. Inside San Quentin, Davis became a symbol, not of power, but of revulsion. Guards kept him isolated, inmates despised him. The state tightened its death row protocols because of cases like his. Decades later, Davis remains behind bars, a living reminder of the crimes that reshape entire systems. 8. Lawrence Bittaker, the Toolbox Killer. Lawrence Bittaker, a name that still sends unease through anyone who studied California's darkest crimes. Alongside his accomplice Roy Norris, Bittaker's 1979 killing spree marked one of the most disturbing chapters in state history. When he arrived at San Quentin, guards described him as eerily calm, polite, quiet, and always reading. But everyone who worked near death row knew who he was, and what he'd done. He spent nearly 40 years on death row, reportedly showing little emotion or remorse. Fellow inmates said he rarely spoke, but when he did, others left the room. Bittaker died of natural causes in 2019. For some, his death was closure. For others, it was a reminder that some stories end too quietly for what they began. 9. Charles "Tex" Watson, the right hand of Manson. He was young, charismatic, and loyal, the man who carried out Charles Manson's commands. Charles "Tex" Watson, once a college athlete from Texas, became one of the central figures in the Manson family murders. Watson was sentenced to death in 1971, later commuted to life when California briefly outlawed the death penalty. At San Quentin, and later in other facilities, he became a quiet figure, deeply religious, speaking little of his past. Yet for decades, his name has remained tied to the fear Manson created, proof that ordinary faces can hide extraordinary darkness. Watson continues to serve his sentence, older now, quieter, but forever marked by the crimes that made him infamous. San Quentin holds nearly 700 inmates on death row. But fear here isn't measured by numbers, it's measured by memory. Each of these men, Manson, Bittaker, Watson, and others, carved their names into the darkest pages of California's history. They remind us that evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers. Behind every locked cell door, every silent corridor, there's one truth that never changes. Some prisons hold bodies. San Quentin holds legends. You're watching The Crime Source. Subscribe for more videos like this.